Hey, welcome back for another conversation on Living Connected. Today we have Tam Pendleton with us, and she's going to talk to us about our stories and the traumas and the things that we deal with and how that can change our life and how Christ plays into that. It's beautiful. Thanks for being here, Tam.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So give us about 2 minutes here. Just tell us about you. Who is Tam Pendleton for those who have never met you and don't know what you do and who you are?
Well, I think I'm 20 years old, but I'm really old. And I love helping people find their heart again. I love helping people line themselves out. And I line themselves up in alignment with Christ. And I kind of had to learn that the hard way. A lot of cosmic 2x4s, a lot of trauma, a lot of difficult stories in my life. And I got to this place by listening to other people's stories, listening to my own story, and trying to figure out how, as I raised my family, as I had friends, as my family was raised, I decided to, it was time to pursue a career. And during that time, stories again were shown to me how that sometimes our stories, it's us making sense of the world. It's a young child having trauma and trying to figure out the best way to manage life. And maybe sometimes it turns out to be that nobody else could drive the bus when you're 3, so you drive the bus when you're 3. And then when you're 33, you're still driving the bus like a 3-year-old. You're still guiding your life as a child would, with some stories that meant everything at the time, but later are getting in our way. And so how can we, my stories have all come about learning the fields that I've studied have all come about by seeing how if we can turn our story over to the atonement of Christ, that beautiful endings can come to those stories that once looked pretty grim. So.
Oh, now I want to hear your whole story. I'm sure we'll get glimmers of it here. Awesome. Okay, so what do you mean by stories? Do you mean like bedtime stories? What is a story to you?
They turn into bedtime stories, and bedtime stories evolve, don't they? Our families, we have stories that get passed down. And so as we have experiences in our life, we have a choice. Every time there's an experience, we either go to, we have 2 resources to use to explain those stories in our life. And one, natural man, our survival system, our subconscious mind.
Go back. You said there's 2 kinds of stories,
okay.
And then we had a tech glitch. So just repeat that so we make sure everybody can hear it.
Okay. So in those 2 kinds of stories, there's always, there are these 2 options that come from an experience. Something happens to you and you make a decision based on where you're at. If you're in a beautiful, intuitive place, beautiful, spiritual, mature, lovely place, then you're going to apply cool meanings to this beautiful experience you just had. But if you're in a place of survival, if you're in the natural man, which is to me your nervous system, just survival here, flight, fight, freeze, play dead, then you have an experience. And based on if you're in that mindset, and if you're always in flight or freeze or play dead, then you're going to apply that meaning to this experience. So one person in a room can have a fabulous experience from what they see, and one person can have a difficult one. And as we apply meaning to the experience, then there come all these thoughts or feelings. You've had the experience, and now boom, next thing that happens, you're thinking about it, you're feeling it. So it becomes an endocrine response. Your body is responding to your brain's thoughts with a chemical reaction, and we get really hooked on those chemical reactions. It's really fun to tell an exciting, funny story, and there's lots, think about that, how much fun it is if you have a good storyteller in your family and everybody all lights up and you can't wait for the punchline and you know what's going to happen and everybody laughs and it's fun. Well, the same thing happens with negative stories. When they're sad and they're difficult, and your nervous system has kind of reeled in this story about how this terrible thing has happened, and from your perspective in fight, flight, or freeze, then the story there's a punch to it. We know what to expect. There's going to be an emotional bam in there that may make us cry or may make us feel victimized. And we get hooked on that. We literally, it's like a drug. It is a drug. It's a chemical response in the body. And we get very hooked and addicted to the feelings we get from telling our stories.
Okay. Yeah, that's powerful. And I've definitely found that to be true in my life as well. So explain to us, how would we find those stories? And is there certain things that'll bring them up? And then we just need to have that awareness to say, oh, look, here's a story.
Yeah, well, those stories come out of our mouths all day long. Like anytime you're trying to make an excuse, I would say this is a really good way, is when you feel like you need to make an excuse. If you're feeling like you need to please someone, if you're in a toxic relationship, if you've got fears, if you don't feel safe, what are the stories coming out of your mouth? And what are the images you have in your head? Like if you picture yourself, like say I ask you to picture yourself as a mother, what is the image in your mind of the truth of you as a mom? I mean, that to some women they're gonna curl up in a ball and suck their thumb. I mean, it is like, no.
Wow.
And to others, they're going to feel good about it. But that, you can ask yourself some questions and it will show you the image is just the same. It's just a visual of the story, right? And so just kind of watching what comes out of your mouth and what makes you cry, what in a difficult way, what hurts when you talk about it. And frequently that's going to be safety. And does that make sense, Livia?
Yeah, totally makes sense. And hopefully it makes sense to people who have never heard this before as well, because I've been doing this for a long time, so it makes a lot of sense to me. But it really is that, what is the experience that we're having? And anytime something feels off or we're avoiding something, then it's kind of this, hey, what's under that?
What's under that? And then to kind of just to observe with love instead of, oh, I'm so sick of that story, or I'm so sick of feeling that way. So for me, a feeling is a story. It's like, I talk a lot. I love to talk. I love to tell stories. And sometimes my story gets very interesting to me. And can I just tell a little story that,
Yes, please.
It happened this week. And I have clients. I work I'm a practitioner. I'm a board certified naturopath, and I'm also an energy worker. And so I see all kinds of people come through my little wellness center, and I see and hear stories all day long. I could tell you stories that would make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, because people go through such hard things. And I was just talking with a dear friend, and she and I were talking, and I was describing to her an experience with my dad that felt really uncomfortable to me. And I blamed my dad for this experience. I was probably 9 years old, and my dad was such a good guy. But he did not know how to talk to little girls. Okay. He was like as dumb as a post when it came to talking to little girls at a level they could understand. So the house was filled with boys and me. And so he talked to me like a boy. And sometimes that hurt my sensibility.
Oh,
so
you're frozen.
I was in this moment, and when I'm looking at a story, I'm always trying to see.
You were frozen again. You said he didn't know how to talk to little girls, and then we went out.
Okay, so
okay.
He really did not know how to talk to little girls. So I decided that I'm going to try and see more from his perspective. Rather than me applying all the meaning to the story, I'm going to see how it looks to apply his meaning to the story. My dad has passed away. So in my imagination, I went to this place, and instead of in the situation we were in, I decided to ask him, or to tell him the truth of why I was being hurt. Because I'll just shut down. If somebody says something unkind to me, I'll shut down, and I'll just. And so my friend said, "Okay, so what's your dad? You tell your dad the truth here."
Sam?
Ooh.
We lost you again.
Yeah. Okay. So
Okay.
sorry.
So you said I think you were saying you would shut down. You went like this and then you were stuck.
Yeah. I would just shut down if I wasn't feeling that there was empathy in the conversation, right? That someone wasn't hearing me and feeling me. So I decided to add my father's feelings into the conversation in my imagination. Like, okay, so I'm going to tell dad the reason I'm struggling with this is honestly, I'm being abused by an extended member of the family and you don't know about this. And so I'm behaving this way because this is happening and I have to behave this way or this is going to happen to me. It was a rock and a hard place for me. And in my story, I tell myself all these years, I never gave him a chance to respond to the truth in my own heart. I believe you can go back and change a situation by looking at it and applying a different meaning. So I told my dad what was happening, and his eyes got really big in my imagination, and he was outraged, and he went away to beat that person up. You know, this is a 9-year-old in my head, right? And so my friend asked me an interesting question, and she said, "What was the first time you felt not so safe with your dad?" After this, you know, this conversation, I felt there was resolution, but there was something underneath that. And what was underneath it is this silly story. Like, has nothing to do with bad guys. It's just me and my dad. And I was probably maybe I was a toddler. I couldn't have been more than 18 months old. And I was at SeaWorld with my dad. And I mean, I remember this like it's yesterday. And at SeaWorld, they had this round seal tank, big seal tank. And there was a basket on the fence. So you could lean over on this fence and not drop anything into the seals. Well, my dad set me on this basket so I could just rest there. And he's a very playful person. I'm a playful person. I'm sure he thought, oh, you'll love looking at the seals from right here. But for me, I have been terrified by that story my whole life. So pictures in my mind, I love animal life. I love seals, but look, I still can see myself looking down at them and they're very close to me and I am terrified. And I was just kind of stunned. Here we go from this one story to this other story. And they seem to not have anything in common. And but what I chose to do was, okay, Dad, this really scares me to be sitting in this basket. And you may not know that my whole life I will have fears of being high over suspended over something and looking down and something going to get me. And you probably don't want me to have that experience, do you? And he's like, oh no. And so the interesting thing was in my story, my dad scooped me up and he held me really tight. And then together we leaned down way over the seals and we were like petting their noses and feeling their whiskers. And it turned from a story of sheer terror to absolute delight.
That is a beautiful story. It actually makes me wonder. My oldest daughter is very reserved, very much calm and cautious about everything. But when she was little, Dad and Grandpa used to throw her like this across the room, back and forth, and catch her. And they thought it was the greatest thing. And I'm over there having a heart attack as the mom. By the time I got to the third kid, I was like, okay, it's just what they do. But I didn't know about all this stuff about how that adds into the trauma. Wonder if she can remember that. I'm gonna have to ask her.
Yeah, I've always been struck that I could remember that. You know, people tell you they remember stuff from being really young, and you're like, yeah, right. But I remember.
Yeah, see, I think it's cool. I can't remember anything since I was like 8, I think is my earliest memory.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Okay, so how do we connect to ourselves so we can like be aware of the stories when they come?
Well, that is a great question. And one thing that really gets in the way of connecting to ourselves is emotion. It's kind of like this, my little object lesson. So you have your body, you have your spirit, and the thing that gets in the way of communication there is emotion. It just makes a layer in between that makes it super hard for this to happen. And so if we can kind of look at how to let the emotion, the story, the charge of those things kind of step away, then we have a chance of making those observations stories. So thinking about the seals as a little girl, right? Like the thoughts are not the seals are going to get me. My dad left me there to die. That was my story. And so what I can do is I can put my hand right here and I can say, even though I am terrified right now and afraid that my dad didn't value me, and just kind of allow those feelings to move through and feel them, because we tend to push them back. To feel that, even though I feel afraid, I'm going to love and accept myself just as I am, no matter what. And it's like you're using this powerful chakra in your hand to connect to this powerful heart that's kind of the center of your chakras too. And you're making this gigantic connection. Endocrine system,
One more time, go back to connection. We got
chakras.
I think we have a delay because when
You're
I start
making
talking,
this
I wait for like 10 seconds. Okay, so you talked about, you were talking, yeah, it's okay. You said when we're connecting to our heart, go from there. And that was chakra point on your
connecting
heart.
to the heart, chakra point to chakra point on your heart, plus this giant energy system of your vagus nervous system, which holds all your early stress and pain and worries and drama and trauma. And so as you hold here and you're identifying yourself as, hey, I'm the sovereign here. I'm the one who makes the choices about my stories. Nobody else decides this for me. I am the sovereign, and I am going to feel this, and then I'm going to love myself, and I'm going to ask God to just love on me as well. And as you're holding your hand here and as you're welcoming that emotion, then just to open the heavens up a little bit and shower on yourself some, hey, even though I'm feeling scared, I'm going to love me anyway. And that just opens this door to self-acceptance, because we can't get anywhere without self-acceptance.
That's powerful. I've never heard it said with like the chakra points in the Vegas. I've never heard it explained that way. But like I'll go for a walk and I just stop in the sun. So the sun is like on me and I just close my eyes and I do this and then I open and I just imagine like God cleansing me of anything. But I never knew like the scientific-y side behind what it does. So it's really powerful to understand that. Thank you.
Yeah, you are blasting your nervous system with a wave of love instead of a wave of trauma. Because what happens in those early scary stories and in those later scary stories, it stays there in that nervous system. And you're just not going to, you're probably not going to progress very well until you allow yourself to stabilize in that nervous system and then detox all that stuff out. And so you just mentioned taking a walk and going, you're opening yourself up. Your walking is going to stabilize your mood, and detoxing, opening your arms to the sun and going, come on, let me have it. Let me have that love. That's a part of detoxing. And that brings a stability and a feeling good through your day. And those are the basics of living a powerful life, is to be stable, to detox, and to have the space to thrive.
I love that. And I find that like usually I'll try to do it in the grass if it's not freezing here in Utah. Then I'll put my feet in the grass. So it's like that grounding at the same time. And I just imagine it like all flushing out of me. And it's amazing how quickly that it can shift how you're feeling and experiencing things. And then to add that into your story of this is what I'm choosing rather than what I was experiencing. And even just to remember teaching your 3-year-old how to drive the bus right? Instead of teaching your 33-year-old how to not drive like a 3-year-old.
Yeah, it's like being the sovereign and saying, okay, I'm the ruler of this body and spirit. I submit myself to my Father, to my God, and I ask for the atonement of Christ to wash through and to save me in this moment. Atonement means also in Hebrew means kafar, which is to cover and which is to make something right. And if we can think about, this hand right here is making a little step, asking for the love and light of God to cover, to make right. And we are the partner in that. We can't have that unless we ask for it.
because that's where the law of agency, he won't take it from us. So we talked a little bit about the Consecrated Life Project, and that picture is Christ holding his hands out. And it always reminds me that I have to give it to him. He's not going to say, give me your trauma, give me your heart. I'm going to take it away from you, because that's part of us having that sovereignty to be able to choose. And it's so beautiful that he allows us to do that. And that when we look at the hard things and say, wow, this is showing me where I have something that I need to give him. Because if we didn't see it, then we wouldn't consciously be able to choose.
And I remember being a little girl, and in my church, we had a painting of Christ standing at the door, and there was no doorknob. And so I was probably 10 years old. And I remember learning that lesson and going, and the teacher said to me, do you see there's no doorknob right there? And I'm thinking, he's Jesus, he can go anywhere. But he would never intrude. And you know, I have grown children. I know what it's like to be a parent and to intrude. And there's times when I have intruded, not meaning to, but thinking that I had something to offer that was going to help right in this moment. And it wasn't always welcome, right? At any age for a child. So
or an adult, right? Or an adult.
Right.
Like sometimes you just want to be in your funk and you don't want somebody to get in there and try to get you out of it.
That's right. And so to have that choice, or if they're particularly people that have a very huge wound with God, he cannot come blasting through there without being asked. And so people get mad when they're hurt. You know, God left me in this. Yesterday, someone said to me, God gave me this sweet woman was living a very consecrated life, but things were getting out of balance, and she had lots of babies, and someone came back into her life,
Frozen.
decided to have an affair with because she wasn't getting enough attention at home, right?
Hang on, you just froze. Okay, she said she had a consecrated life and she had a lot of little kids, and then we lost you.
And things were falling apart in her marriage, and someone from her past came through and charmed her, and she had an affair, and she was so mad at God because he gave her a situation that he knew she could not resist. This was what her mind is telling her. This is her story. God gave her more than she could resist. And she is having a really hard time forgiving herself you see the drama here. Like, God loves her the same. He's trying to help her heal, but she's so angry she can't accept him or his name in her life. And until she can forgive herself and allow him back in her life, she's gonna be stuck.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone like that? How can you help them to allow him in?
By first forgiving herself, going through that story. And is it true that God gave you more than you could handle? No. We have to be responsible for ourselves. And one of the problems that she was having in her life was boundary issues, right? She can't put up very good boundaries because she doesn't have any boundaries for herself. We have to accept full responsibility for our actions. Nobody made us do anything. We chose out of our own stories and our own pain. And when you start there and can try to forgive yourself, then you have room in for God to help you do that.
Yeah. Okay, so if someone says, okay, I found a story, now what do I do with it? Give us some like practical tips. What can they do right now in this moment? If they're like, hey, story's coming up in my head. When this is over, I'm going to go get a paper or do whatever you tell me. What do I do?
So you want to make note of what your perception of the story is, and then just stop for a second and look around. Like, who else is watching? Is your mom in the story? Is your sister? Is your best friend? And are you seeing it from the full spectrum, from the full perspective, or is it just your little, remember those two things, either spirit, being in an intuitive state where you can accept the experience with love and light, or are you struggling and scared? And if you're struggling and scared, you're likely to respond to this experience in a fearful way. So if you can take yourself out of the story for a minute and look around, that's what I would say. Take yourself out of the story. Look around at what else is happening. What is the person in the room doing? And what does God think about what's happening? And have that conversation and listen to the answer. And when you can do that, you can rewrite the story.
Love that. What does God think about the situation?
See, I think that that's the overall. So the point of my work is to help people take their truth and feel it in their bodies and physiologically feel it, experience it, notice it, and observe it. And then, if they're willing, can they take on all those issues? Can they allow Christ to cover all that? Can they allow his story to be overlaid their story? And that may sound kind of weird, but that's how it works for me. It's like, okay, I see how I see this. Now, can I have my Redeemer, my Savior, walk through this with me and put his truth through my brain, through my chakras, through my tissues, and let his truth override my funny little story so I can learn to be more submissive to his love, willing to accept his love, and willing to be able to reciprocate that love to others.
Oh, that's beautiful. So I was watching The Book Thief last week with my daughter for a school project. And I had this realization that I didn't get the first time that I watched it, of this girl who's then been given up by her mom. And she's in this state with this family and the mom who doesn't want her. I don't know if you've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, but she's there and they end up harboring a Jew and trying to hide him from the Nazis. And it's this thing. And the mom's like, you come right home after school. Was I frozen? Looked like I got frozen. So she's like, Case, you were harboring this Jew.
Yeah.
You said I was frozen?
Yeah,
Am I
that's
okay
the part where you're talking about harboring the Jew.
Yeah, so she was harboring the Jew, and the mom was like, hey, you come right back from school. You don't tell anyone that we have him. And I realized the timeline of that, those people who would have been the age of that girl harboring that Jew, don't talk, don't say anything, hold it all in. Those are our parents and our grandparents. So we have been raised with these people who were told, shh, don't say anything, we're going to get in trouble. You have to hold it all in. And so it's amazing now that like the whole world is kind of waking up and being like, okay, we're holding all this trauma from these people who have lived in these really, really hard times. And now it's our job to help heal that, to break those generational chains. Oh.
And
are we back? We froze again.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you all for your patience and listening to this as we keep freezing out with our tech glitches. But just to be able to be like, okay, it's our job to find those stories, and whether or not we know where they come from, you know, like for your dad might have not, for him, he was like, oh, I'm making this fun for you. And to be able to put yourself in his perception of I'm having fun, you know, for my husband and my father-in-law, they're throwing my baby and look, she's laughing and she's smiling and isn't this fun? You know, but that seeing someone else's experience shifts the way that we see the experience and having that more compassion. Because I know like my mom grew up in a really rough situation, and to see like the way that she raised us, my mom's amazing, by the way, for anyone who's listening and knows my mother, but that the way she tends to not open up as much is because of the hard things she had as a kid and the way that those stories have played out. And so it's very powerful to go in and do the work and to help ourselves to heal.
It is, because we, you know, it's science now understands that through epigenetics and other things, that every experience your mother had and and those grandparents had and my grandparents had is recorded in your tissues, in your DNA, and in your cells, and in your cells is where your subconsciousness is. So everything that's happened to everyone is kind of a part of us, and we're just we're in this body trying to figure out how to differentiate our stuff from theirs, and there kind of isn't. We just clean it out and it cleans it up for everybody. We just clean it for ourselves and it moves backwards. As we are clean from it, as we are released from it, they are released from it. That's how I see it.
I find that even just praying and asking God, help me to see it and help me to be able to be brave enough to go through it when I see it.
Yes, and for the strength to let it go. And also, we can pray for the strength to release anything that is part of that story that is adversarial, that comes from darkness, that is not truth, and that has been wound up inside our stories. We have the right to ask for that to be gone, to rebuke that from our bodies and our hearts in the name of Christ.
I feel like we just need a moment of silence to let that sink in. And that the atonement can cover absolutely anything. And when we add Jesus to anything and everything that we do, he makes it better. He makes it possible what seems impossible.
It does. And if we can just hang on to the idea that we are only here to learn. And did we learn from all those mistakes? That sweet lady that I told you about, you know, her experience, I asked her, okay, what did you learn? You know, from making that choice, what did you learn? And if you learned, then you have been successful and you're ready to move to the next thing because we learned. That's all we're here to do. And hopefully we're choosing to learn with Christ and to learn how this big bad world works. And that means if there is an amazing redeemer, then there is an adversary fighting against that. And it makes us, I think we get afraid to talk about that, but it's just the truth. And if you don't know the tools of Jesus Christ, you're not aware of the tools of his adversary, Lucifer.
Yeah. Well, and even in that lady's story, it makes me think of the wrong road. It was Elder Holland talked about the wrong roads and how you'll go this far. And he felt really strongly, I'm going to go this far. And she felt maybe, you know, I couldn't not do, you know, I couldn't withstand whatever. So she goes this way, this far, and then realizes, oh my goodness, what did I do? And then she goes back and then she can go this way with so much more confidence and saying, I learned from what I did. And I learned that this is the road I don't want to be on. So I'm going to change and go back to the road that leads me to God.
So true. And a large part of her story too is the judgment of the world around her. She was not accepted for her mistake. She was treated, you know, like a leper in the scriptures. And we have a lot to learn as a community in Christ on how to treat those who are just learning, because we're all just learning, right?
We all get to learn in our own ways. And I feel like God gives us the perfect ways that we need to learn because he knows our stories and he knows what needs to heal and he knows what we can go through and how we can take one step at a time and that we can learn from all the experiences if we choose to.
If we choose to. And honestly, with all my heart, I believe that I sat down with my Father in heaven before I ever took on this body. And we made a plan. Here's what I want to learn. Can you help me learn this? And I'm not so sure I always love the way I get to learn, but I know I asked and I know my soul has an agenda and I will find every part and piece on that agenda. And I hope I have enough time to do that, right? That's what I want.
Me too. Me too. Do you have any other tips or tools that can help us transform our stories that you feel like you'd like to share? I'm sure you have a whole lot of them, but do you have any that are coming up? Like, I should share that one.
Well, I do have a visualization on my website that I think might be helpful to a lot of very Christian based. So if Christian is not your thing,
a visualization.
Visualization.
This is the gift that they get, right? The one that I'll send out the email.
Free gift that you can go to my website, tampendleton.com, and scroll to the bottom of the homepage, and there's this visualization, and it's called Relax, Restore, Ready. And the purpose of that visualization is for you to have a very nurturing, loving experience, and to kind of get in touch with, well, the way that I got it, honestly, was I was having a dream, and I kept dreaming that there was this thing in front of me, and I was trying to breathe and it was trying to breathe. It was like a box and I couldn't relate to it. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be in sync with this thing, but I can't relate to it. It was a weird moment. And then I realized through my dream that that it was God, that God was standing in front of me, but I didn't recognize him in that form. And that all I needed to do was lay my head on his chest and listen to him breathe. And as I listened to him breathe, I would know what to do next. I would be at peace. And I became aware that he was trying to he was trying to clothe me in a new armor, in a restored armor, restored from my time, from my place, for us in this amazing time that we live in. And it looks different than the armor in the scriptures because we need it different than the armor in the scriptures sometimes. But the idea is the same. And so that's what it is. It's just to help you prepare for your day in a calm and loving and grateful way.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing such a wonderful gift, and thank you for being with us today. We appreciate you a million times over.
Thank you, Livia, and good luck in this amazing thing you're sharing the light of Christ in so many great ways.
Thank you. So is your website, Tim Pendleton, the best way for them to contact you if they want to learn more?
Yeah,
Okay.
and
And you're based out of Utah, right?
I'm in Springville, Utah.
Well, Utah. Okay, that's good to know for those who are local. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day. We're grateful that you've been with us.
Thank you. Thanks. Cheers.